Hey everybody, it's Lataya, aka the Trauma Mama Therapist, Psycho-educator, and researcher focused on perinatal mental health. And we are back, okay, with a whole nother video today. Now, again, I want to stress this, with this channel, I really want to focus on lived experience, with a tad bit of psychoeducation and a tad bit of research. But if you are focused on straight education, advice, things like that, without the lived experience part and a little bit of like chatter, go over to Nurture for Moms page. It is strictly focused on that. I want to stress also that neither one of these pages are medical advice or therapy. With that being said, let's get into the video, okay? So I didn't know that I had PTSD, postpartum PTSD until my second, really honestly until way after my second pregnancy. I made a lot of decisions based strictly on the fact that I wasn't going through what I went through in my first pregnancy. In my second pregnancy, it was a absolute no for me, okay? I took so many measures to make sure that my pregnancy was different. And I'll be doing a series on what I did in my first pregnancy versus my second pregnancy. But for now, I just strictly want to focus on the actions that I took that actually was rooted in PTSD and how I wish a mental health counselor would have pointed that out to me and processed it with me. But of course they did not. If you don't have that perinatal training, sometimes you don't really know how to focus in on certain disorders. And also, y'all, it's really not enough research about perinatal and maternal mental health at all. Like, we are really just now scratching the surface, like literally just now scratching the surface on the things that we need to be focusing on in this field. So if you don't see enough research on it, trust me, it's not just you. So I didn't really know that I had PTSD until I was doing much better, until I went through all of my clinical mental health training and my perinatal training. Like, I knew I had a little PTSD from the miscarriage, but from my birthing experience, it was very traumatic. But a lot of the decisions that I made was in result to the PTSD that I had. Am I mad that I made those decisions? Absolutely not. I think that these are things that I wish I would have known. And honestly, I think a lot of people go into their first pregnancy not knowing anything. We just be like, la-di-da-di-da, like doctors know everything, just focus on the doctors. I just want to have a positive experience. You think, I just don't really want to focus on any negative outcomes. I'm just like not gonna think about it, right? And then you get your first pregnancy experience and you like, okay. I think I was a little naive to just go into it just thinking that it was just go into it blindly. I never suggest that to any mom. I think that one of the most important things in going into any pregnancy is to be informed. Not necessarily informed of all of the negative things that could happen, but just be informed about the decisions that you are making. And that's what I wasn't. In my first pregnancy, I was so misinformed about the decisions that I was making. I had 2 inductions, 1 failed induction, and I decided to not rush to have a C-section or elective C-section. After that induction, I had Pitocin and all of the medications got violated all type of which ways, just putting different pills up there and everything, trying to make my body do what it wasn't ready to do at 37 weeks, just because of, I actually forgot what it was, because I actually had a autoimmune disorder called antiphospholipid syndrome. And I also want to say that I didn't even know it was a autoimmune disorder until I just went to the plastic surgeon to tell them that I had been on blood thinners before and I had a pulmonary embolism and I was trying to get a tummy tuck. And they said, yeah, that's actually an autoimmune disorder. Again, we not going to speak to the fact that I should have known that was that, which again goes to show the lack of education that we get as patients about our bodies and about the things that we get diagnosed with in pregnancy. But needless to say, the decisions that I made in my second pregnancy was a direct result of how traumatic being rushed into an emergency C-section was. I remember going from, having a Pitocin and having some type of pill put in my body and everything opening up so fast. I went from being dilated like at a 1 to being dilated at a 6 super fast. And next thing you know, I'm being rushed saying that my daughter's heart rate was at risk, and I was at risk, and we needed to hurry up and do an emergency C-section. And again, very traumatic. And I made so many decisions, not even asking any questions. It was just like, sign the papers and let's go, right? I had a very hard healing experience. I felt like I was hit by a bus. It's so many other things that could have went wrong, but let's just say I became very type A about the next birth that I had. I got pregnant almost like a year and maybe a little under a month after my first pregnancy, and I did things so much differently. For one, we planned for our pregnancy. I mean, actually, I did that the first time, but the second time that we planned for our pregnancy, I actually was planning on a birth that I was having, okay? Because I was not stepping foot in the hospital whatsoever, okay? I was not doing it. I was like, I'm going to give birth from home. We're going to do a whole bunch of research. I started following a whole bunch of videos and Instagrams and TikToks and YouTube videos about home births, and start educating myself about VBACs. Didn't know anything about that. VBAC is a vaginal birth after a cesarean, if you did not know. I started educating, because what they tell you is that once you have one C-section, you have to have another one. I was not doing it, okay? Absolutely not. And funny enough, long story short, I'm going to tell you that my second birth did end up in a C-section, but in a different way. I chose a home birth midwife. I already emailed her. I said, hey, listen, sis, we trying. I want to give birth at home. I'm not stepping foot in the hospital. This was my experience. I had a consultation with her. I was ready, okay? I also, and long story short, I wasn't able to give birth at home because I had a pulmonary embolism, which you've seen in one of my previous videos. So that was one decision that I made from my first experience. I was just not, I swore to God I was not stepping foot in another hospital. Secondly, my first doctor was white, and I purposely decided that I was going to have a Black woman doctor. Now, it wasn't necessarily focused on Black versus white, but I will say, after having, after educating myself a lot on a Black mortality rate, and how so many more people have this experience with being pushed into induction and then going straight into C-section because of an emergency C-section. I read a lot about some of the reasons why people get pushed into induction. And I'm not going to really get into that, because in this page, I don't want to give any medical advice. And if your doctor is telling you to do that, I just suggest do any type of research. Which actually is going to lead me to my second thing that I did, which I still think you should do. Whether it was made from a decision with PTSD or not. I got a doula. Matter of fact, I actually got two doulas who decided to split the fees in half, because one doula was focused on my pre-birth and the second doula was focused on actually being there for the birth and my postpartum. And I think that was actually one of the best decisions I made. I mean, it was a phenomenal decision that I made, because that doula really helped me to process the pregnancy that I had went through, and also to just really inform me of really be my advocate. And I would say that was another decision that I made. And I think the last decision that I made that was really PTSD, like a consequence of being traumatized, I could not give birth at the hospital that I gave birth at. And if you are like me and you like, I want to switch hospitals, I want to switch doctors, I want to switch all this shit up, okay? That's what I experienced. I didn't want anything that reminded me of my last pregnancy. I really was very scared to give birth again in a hospital. And I started doing a lot of research about pregnancy, and I became a little obsessed with it to try to control the outcome of my next pregnancy, which I could not. I say that my next pregnancy ended up in an elected C-section, and I'm happy I did go that route, because it gave me so much more bodily autonomy. over myself because I was not willing to put my body through another induction. And that was another decision that I made due to postpartum PTSD. I wanted to change my doctor. I wanted to, and my doctor, the reason why I chose her mainly was not only because she was Black, but she was on a list of VBAC doctors because I was very determined to have a vaginal birth. And I decided to go with her because I was so determined to change my pregnancy or birthing experience outcome. Now, how it led to an elective C-section, we could get into that story another day, but I'm just going to say I did not want to go through an induction because I was not going to be forcing my body to do something that I wasn't ready to do. However, I did go to almost 41 weeks. I was like a few hours from 41 weeks, and I decided to get an elected C-section. And I told them that of the different things that I wanted to go on. I listened to music. It was a very peaceful experience until my baby went to the NICU. But that's another story for another day. Again, when I tell y'all, the lived experience is endless when it comes to everything I went through in perinatal mental health, child. And like, I've had so many experiences, and of course I would with 4 different pregnancies. But yeah, and then when I went through my perinatal mood disorder training, I already knew I had PTSD, but from other things. But I realized, like, wow, even women who decide to not have a second child based on the experience that they had in their first pregnancy, that's still a symptom of PTSD. And again, women don't really get diagnosed with this unless you go to your provider or a perinatal psychiatrist and therapist. And a lot of women don't do that because it is such a shortage of these specialized therapists. So with that being said, I did kind of come to the conclusion, like, wow, I made so many decisions from a mental health disorder that I wasn't technically diagnosed with. From a perinatal standpoint, I was diagnosed with PTSD, complex PTSD, but not perinatal PTSD. And if you are like me, if you made so many decisions based on your first pregnancy, you could have PTSD. I'm not diagnosing you because, again, this is not therapy. But, the symptoms are there, and it does make sense as to why. And I don't think it's a disadvantage. I don't necessarily think it's something that doesn't serve us, right? I think that when you make these decisions from having PTSD, you are essentially creating a safer environment for yourself. I do think some of the symptoms that could be managed may be, how you feel in your body, if you grounded, if you are calm in these different hospital settings. I did, in the hospital I gave birth at was actually one of the best in Michigan at the time. So it's not to say it was the hospital. I don't even think it was the doctor. I just think that I was just way more aware of the things that go on in pregnancy and why the Black mortality rate is higher for Black women. I get it. So after going through that experience, I made so many different experiences, so many different decisions. And I think due to that, it changed the trajectory of how I look at pregnancy, how I look at birthing experiences, what I'll be doing differently with my daughters, and the type of things that I'll be putting in place for women who go through these experiences. But yeah, that was my experience with postpartum PTSD. Very traumatic. And I know, I could talk about in other videos PTSD as it relates to miscarriage, but I definitely think that's super common. And I could go into that in a later video. But if you liked and enjoyed this video, and if, for one, let's start off, if you need to ground yourself, please take some time, go touch some grass, do the 4-7-4 method of breathing, or some different grounding techniques to just be safe in your body, especially if you are pregnant. Definitely suggest just slowing it down because it is a trigger when you are pregnant and you have a very traumatic previous experience, whether that is miscarriage, loss, full birth term NICU, whatever the case is. It's so many things that we experience as women that I wish we had more support on, but that is where I am trying to do my part. So if you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. If you think somebody else needs it, please pass it along. Thank you. See you.